Welcome to episode 2 of Correcting the King James. I have put a lot of effort into creating some tables that I can use to make translation more consistent and easier. And these are available right off my blog. They're available to anybody. They are released in the open source GNU license, and then any of the text that comes out of them is in the Creative Commons license. So the first thing you're going to need to do if you're creating your own translation is to get a capture of some of the files. So the first one you're going to need is the base file, and make a copy. And then you're going to want to move it to your own folder. Organize, move. Corrected King James, move that there. And I'll work on the access in just a minute. And then we are going to start with Obadiah. I'm going to talk about why here in just a minute. Make a copy. Organize, move, corrected King James. Move it there, and then we're done in here. And then we will rename these. Corrected King James translation base file. Corrected King James translation of Obadiah. Now, the reason we're starting with Obadiah is because it is the shortest book in the Old Testament. And short counts for a lot. It'll give us an opportunity to get some things started and to get a feel for how the files are working really quickly and get to the end of a book fairly quickly. It's also only one chapter, so it's not going to be till we get to the next book after that that some of the features, for chapters and whatnot, really start to come into play. But when you've got a lot of books to work on, then you got to start somewhere. And so once you've got your information, or once you've got your files, we are going to completely empty everything out. And the same thing for Obadiah. I have completed the open source translation of Obadiah, and then we're going to talk about what I've got here and what we're going to keep and what we're going to change. Everything in the translation tab can go away. Because we are not just updating a translation, we are making a new translation that is not at all related to the open source, except that it uses the same tables. You want to keep one line here. If it's gray, that means don't touch, unless you really know what you're doing. If it's white, it means this is where you're going to be entering your information. And so we come to the interlinear tab, and you will notice everything is gray. Don't touch anything. The only way that I'm going to make an exception to that, this is going to take a little while to load, it will reload everything. Oh, does this have extras down at the bottom, or is it? It does. So what we're going to do is we are going to take everything from the second line, and we're going to delete it, and then we're going to have it auto repopulate, and that'll get us down, and it'll usually auto repopulate more than we need, so we'll delete what we don't need. We'll go to the plain text tab. Everything here can be cleared away. Nothing in here stores anything. Everything here is auto-generated. This is a tab we'll get to later. Everything here is auto-generated. Everything here is auto-generated. Dictionary is automatically drawn. So, my raw files, my raw and processed, depending on who you are and what you are doing, you may decide to just scrap the raw and the processed files. These are data that I generated from the XML from Tanakh.us that has freely available Leningrad codex files, and then once I just extract the text, I do some basic manipulations in a spreadsheet level here. You're welcome to look at these. These are not to be trusted in any way. These are something done by me in about an hour just to extract the data. You will probably have another way you prefer to extract the data, and that is great. I am doing it the way that is easiest for me, the way that I can do things in an hour after, find the data, and then in an hour I've got everything I need in my source tab. And so everything in my source tab is going to be, I'm going to leave alone, even though there is some metadata that we'll have to talk about as we get to it. So here in the print column, these are the words of the text, and these words are what are going to be looked up in the dictionary to create a file. Divider, even though you can't see it, if I'm pulling it out of the other data. These are spaces unless they need to not be for some very specific reason. For example, after a makaf, those of you that don't know enough Hebrew to know what I'm talking about, the dash. After that, there's not a space, so this one will be blank. This is generated in other tabs. The divider will have some processing that is done on it. In this one, I decided that for the source text, I wanted to keep it as clean as possible because the data is a little more, the less processing I can make the spreadsheet do, the less likely it is to blow up on us. So, and then the margin is the text that will show up in the margin. In the case of the Tanakh, this is going to be the Kure readings. In the Hebrew Bible, the scribes were aware of cases where the text was uncertain, where there was a word that was spelled really, really weird or didn't quite make sense, and they would put a mark in the note in margin saying, we think it's actually trying to say this other thing over here. And some of them get really extensive. In the case of Obadiah, there's only one, and it is such a minor misspelling that 4 scholars could argue for 15 days over whether it even qualifies as a misspelling. It's no big deal. Then we've got the translation text. This is what the translation data will actually draw from. And so whatever word you have here is what it's going to draw from. I made it so that if the print text is all I've got, then it's going to be the print text. If there is a Kure reading, like there is in verse 11, then it will draw the Kure reading. And we will always follow the Kure readings when we're doing the corrected King James. If we note that the original King James did not follow the Kure reading, if it followed the Ketiv reading or the Septuagint reading or something else, we'll note that as we go. We won't make a footnote about it because that's not the kind of translation we're making. But we'll go, oh, hey, we figured out what's going on here. They did this other thing, and we're not. So that gives the lookup text. Sometimes there will be in this case the accents are removed from the lookup text, and then the morpheme entry will tell us which version of this word, how this word breaks down into different components we're going to use. All right, so then we're going to come back over to, oh wait, before we do that, we're going to come back to the front data. English book title, book number. We may end up changing that. We'll delete that for now and we'll come back to it. If you have a particular dictionary that you're using, which we don't for this one, we'll talk about that as we get deeper into this, but if you have a particular dictionary you're using, you can put that in your translation data URL. Once you got this started, you need to change this URL to this URL, and your dictionary URL to your base file. When you do that, you will get a reference, and it will ask if you want to allow access. Allow access. And then we'll come down to the translator data. The name, Sean C. Kennedy, that's me. Qualifications, none, because I don't have any qualifications. Version, this is going to be version 4.0. Oh, wait, I have to change that in the other file. And so, is all of that? Yeah, all of this is imported from, oh, of course it is. It's all gray. Our source, first source is the Tanakh.us, and that is called the Leningrad Codex. And then we have the source information, the day that I captured all the data, and when that goes. I'm also using the Lisborn Bible. I want to use it mostly for formatting data. The XML does not include a lot of formatting data, so if I come here to the Lisborn Bible on archive.org, we can see how professional scribes decided to lay out the data. The Lisborn Bible is beautiful, as you can see. It is absolutely stunning, but they do have a couple of times where they do some things different. It's a handmade Bible. It's not a printed text. It's a manuscript, and so it's also kind of hard to read because you get a little bit of artifacts coming through from the other side. It's fine, there's, if you needed to, you could figure it out, but it does not have, as an example, we already talked about the Kyrie reading in verse 11. The Lisborn Bible doesn't have that. If you look, there is nothing in the margins saying that there's an alternate reading. It actually puts the Kyrie reading in the main texts, and I have enough trouble following this to not be able to find it easily. But when we get there, we'll point that out. We'll zero in on it and see. Obadiah just takes these 2 pages in the Lisborn Bible. It's a short book. And so that is everything in the translation file. The base file is where all of our information is going to come from. And I'm going to talk about how I want to do things a little bit different than what most other people do in just a minute. And you will want to do things different than me, and that is great. I think that having different ways of approaching things is good for us. This is not an open source translation of the Holy Scriptures. This is the corrected King James translation of the Holy Scriptures. Fork data. This is not the original. So we need to we don't need to get in the Lisborn Bible right now. We need to go back to here. Open source translation base. Grab this URL. This is our way of noting where we came from. And the fork date, we are going to put the fork date as the date that this is going to be published. Handy dandy calendar says that is February 7th. 2/7/2026. I'm not going to put any description. If you are a kind of person who wants to put some kind of description, you know, this is a translation of the typical Old Testament and the New Testament, or you know, whatever version you're doing, then you do you. Did I? This is where I need to change that. Corrected King James translation of the Holy Scriptures. All right, and then now there is a certain level of when you have it, you can do what you want. The gray is supposed to indicate don't change that. I forgot, and so there we go. Now we need to clear out all of our data. Again, if it's gray, don't touch it. Roots. Come on, there we go. Dictionary, we are going to build the dictionary as we go, and there are going to be things about this that some people don't like. That's okay. You can make your own translation and do it the way you prefer. That's why I'm making this available. Okay, so now we'll talk about this when we get there. And then universal data. Now we are using Elizabethan English. So in the corrected King, or in the open source translation, I am not using Elizabethan English. I am using today's English. Whatever you want to call that, modern English, which actually Elizabethan English is modern English too, but you know what I mean. In this case, we are going to update things so that it reflects Elizabethan English. In particular, the versions of the second person pronoun. Nope. Yeah. The Universals tab is freeform. So whatever you do here, that is perfectly acceptable. Self line yours. There. And then I have this table here. I'm going to take just a split second to talk about the emoji situation. I was going to not do any emoji in the corrected King James because part of me wants the corrected King James to be just an ounce more serious than the open source translation that I'm doing for just myself. I decided to keep it after doing some work in the open source translation. And the reason is super simple. I find that it helps me really focus on what the text I'm working on is trying to say. I have to really think about what I'm doing. You know, is there an emoji available to cover this? The only downside is that emoji are way easier to do on my phone than on my computer, so I end up going over to my phone to type in when I'm adding an emoji to a definition or something. That's fine. There's worse things in the whole wide world than just that. So, I do believe that means we have most of the information here. I am going to set these up, and we're going to talk about what I do a little bit different than some other people. I'm going to look up on my phone the Tanakh order of books for the Bible. There we go. So I put the books of the Bible in a slightly different order than what some other people do. Most people have the books of their Old Testament in the order that they occur in the Septuagint. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I don't think that the order of the books is actually important enough to make a big fuss over. That said, sometimes reading them in a different order helps bring certain things to the forefront that you're not normally going to notice because something new is going to be at play when you're reading it. I personally have found that 1 John has a way of presenting the philosophy of Christendom and the basic ideas behind Christianity and Christian ethics so clearly that I want everything else that I read to be mapped according to what I've read in 1 John. So, because I get to do what I want, because it's my translation, I am going to put 1 John first. And then, because it just looks weird to separate 2nd and 3rd John, I'm going to put 2nd and 3rd John next. Okay? And so this is my own thing. You may have a different book of the Bible that you think clears everything up. Proverbs or Psalms or Matthew or Genesis, and you are free to put that first. You may also not want to be weird. I don't care about being weird. I'm weird. It's who I am. But you may not want to be, and you may go, actually, I want anybody who picks up my Bible to know where to look for things, because I'm going to let other people pick up my Bible. That's maybe a difference between you and me, is I'm not handing my Bibles out at church. I'm, when somebody comes to me and says, hey, can I borrow your Bible? I go, why would you want to do that? My Bible's weird. And then they go, oh, no Bible's that weird. And then they look at mine and they go, actually, yours is. So, if you just don't want to be weird, you may put your Old Testament in Septuagint order. I'm going to put the Septuagint in Tanakh order, because if somebody does pick up my Bible and they're looking for something different, I want them to have that. I want them to go, oh, hey, this is different, and it made me think about something differently. So we've got Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. If I can spell it right. And then from there, Joshua, Judges, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Kings, 2 Kings, Isaiah, Jeremiah, oops. And then "12 Minor Prophets," which I can't remember the order of those either. Let me look that up. The order of the 12 Minor Prophets is the same. They're just in a different place. Prophets. Order of the Minor Prophets. There we go. Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, which is where we're going to be, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. All right, and that's where I'm going to stop for today. Because I do some other weird things that we're just not going to talk about today. We're going to talk about them differently later. But I'm going to talk a little bit about why some of the things that I do differently. So in the Hebrew tradition, okay, so I've already told you why I do 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John first. In the Hebrew tradition, you've got your first 5 books of the Bible, the Pentateuch, the Torah, whatever you want to call them today, I don't care. they're like the first things that were canonized as part of the Bible, as part of the Hebrew Bible. And then you have the section called the prophets. And first of all, you've got the major prophets, which Joshua, Judges, Samuel, Kings count as prophets. I'm going to come back to that in just a minute. Then you've got Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel as major prophets. And then the minor prophets went with themselves in their own little group, sometimes even just on one scroll, because they were short enough to fit on one scroll. Kings and Samuel were big enough that they had to be split onto two scrolls, and all the 12 minor prophets together could go onto one scroll. It gives you an idea of the difference in scope. And then after that, there's the writing, the Ketuvim. These are, I heard them described, my favorite description I ever heard for the Ketuvim in the Old Testament is they're a junk drawer of other writings. Some of them are old and some of them are new. Some of that's going to depend on who you ask too. If you ask a really traditional old rabbi who holds to the original teachings of the Middle Ages, then he's going to tell you that some of the books are super duper 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 old, and some of them are really 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 new. If you ask a freshly minted Harvard critical scholar, he's going to tell you that everything in the Ketuvim is actually really new, with a few maybe exceptions of maybe 1 or 2 or 15 Psalms are really old, but most of everything else that's a complete book in the Ketuvim is new. I also want to include the Apocrypha in mine, and I'm going to kind of mix some of it in with the writings, and some of it I'm not, because some of it I think kind of goes in that area. We'll talk about where and when and how when we get there. And that's why I don't want to do that today. For one thing, I'm just a little over half the time that I've allotted for today, and for another thing, I just don't want to, because this is my show, and I get to do what I want. And so, Obadiah ends up being 21 on this list. We're going to come back to the front matter here. Translation 21, book number 21. There we go. Now, if we come into our source, we will see that our poor computer doesn't know what to do because I erased all the translation data. We are going to start by copying our lookup text and going to our base file, and one of the things to watch here, so I have a formula here that is pulling out the accents on the lookup text. So if I just copy this and come over and I just put my cursor here and I paste it, I'm going to get a reference error and my formula is going to be all screwed up. So what you want to do is you want to double click so that you've got the text cursor. They call that a caret. I don't know why they call that a caret. I can't even spell carrot right. And then you'll paste it, and that'll paste it without formatting and without the formula, so that you've just got the word there. It'll automatically say, hey, this is the first time this word is showing up, And so now we get to talk about the morphemes. So some words are, particularly in Hebrew, this is less of a thing in Greek, and if you're just doing this in the New Testament, you may be tempted to just make your morphemes line just copy your word line. I'm not going to. We'll talk about that when we get some Greek text to worry about. But for now, in Hebrew, this happens all the time. Many words are composed of different pieces. We are going to use Blue Letter Bible to do all of our lookup. And the reason we are going to do that is because it's free and it's easy. And I am just trying to get people started. So there are a lot of good reasons to not do it this way if you have the skills and the resources. And in fact, I don't do it this way when I'm doing my open source translation. I do not come to Blue Letter Bible except as a last resort. If I've been looking and I've got two different answers and I don't know what to do in my books, then I'll come to Blue Letter Bible and I'll see if I can get some resolution in Blue Letter Bible. But we're not coming here so that you can spend hours watching me pour through a book and flip pages back and forth and go, ooh, 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 while I don't do anything for you. We're coming here so that we can get something going. And we're going to pull a lot of information from Blue Letter Bible directly, and then there are going to be times when I go, aha, but I happen to know, and then I'll take you to some other resource online. I'll try to make sure that I know in advance when these are coming up and deal with it. So the very first word of Obadiah, Hazon. Oh, just a minute. We're going to talk about my pronunciation of Hebrew. Like Moana, I am self-taught. The very first thing I got when I was teaching myself Hebrew, I went down to the public library and I found a really old Hebrew book or Hebrew textbook, and I made photocopies because I was on a budget and I could barely afford the photocopies. So buying a book was kind of out of the question. In the photocopying process, the table that had the letters and their sounds didn't line up correctly on all the pages. It was a small book. The pages went over about 3 or 4 page flips, and the spine was between the letter and the sound. So it was fine if you had the book in front of you and a ruler and could figure out where everything lined up. I didn't. I had my photocopies, and they weren't real great photocopies either. So there were a few letters where I was off by one. I thought the Lamed made the N sound and the Nun made the S sound, and that got really confusing when I was trying to figure out how to pronounce the names of some of our favorite biblical prophets. And so I then went out and I bought the cheapest Hebrew book I could find, which was a For Dummies book. What I didn't know is that the old Hebrew book that I had photocopied was using Yemenite pronunciation, and of course the For Dummies book was using modern Hebrew pronunciation. And I was trying for all my heart to make them say the same thing. And so, as an example, Gimel without the Dagesh in Yemenite pronunciation is J, like a J. But the old book that I had didn't say that. It said it's a soft G, as in George. Okay, I went, that's fine. And of course, the For Dummies book was trying to be helpful and say, without the Dagesh, it's like you put an H on it. So the Gimel without the Dagesh is a G, as in ghost, GH ghost. Well, that is probably the least helpful way anything ever could have explained it. And I was trying for all my heart, because I did not realize at that point that there were different translation schemas out there, to make them say the same thing. And I was trying to pronounce a Gimel without a Dagesh as something kind of in the middle, kind of a G, and a nasally G, and it doesn't help that I have hearing damage. My first adult job when I was 20 years old was doing telephone-based tech support for high-speed internet, back at a time when not very many people had high-speed internet, and most of my customers had their alternate phone line plugged into their modem, and just about 4 too many times I called somebody's modem and it screamed in my ears and it damaged my hearing. So I don't hear everything real great anyway. And so, this was happening all about the same time. My hearing was getting damaged, and I was trying to learn these by reading, and so I pronounced a lot of things very, very, very incorrectly for a very, very, very long time. And with my hearing damage, it's really hard to correct it. I've been using Duolingo for about the last 6 or 7 years as a way to kind of standardize my pronunciation towards modern translation or modern pronunciation. But like I said, I've got hearing damage. I still get it wrong. I'm not perfect at all. So if you hear another teacher pronounce a word different than I do, go with them. And I don't care who they are. If it is, John Doe, who just started a YouTube channel yesterday, his chances of pronouncing it correctly are better than mine, because I've got hearing damage and I started out on a wrong foot. I will do my best. And if somebody corrects me, I will gladly accept correction. But I also am not going to accept criticism. If you go, oh my gosh, you've been working on this for how long and you still sorry, you still mispronounce this letter or these words, my attitude is going to be, yep, get over it. And I won't care. In particular, I tend to put my my accents in the wrong places. So I do like to have accents shown so that I know where to put them when the accents are actually helpful for that. And besides, I put about 5 months into learning how the accents actually work and help you figure out the grammar of the text. It feels like a waste of my time if I don't even look at them, and I don't even remember how they all work sometimes. I remember some of the basics, but I did put a lot of time into figuring out how they work so that I could add them to another project. But anyway, Chazon is nothing particularly interesting as far as the morphemes. It is just going to come straight across. You know what? I'm gonna do it this way. I'm gonna grab it because it is a slightly altered form, and then we'll grab the next word, Obadiah. Obadiah. I like to do these one whole verse at a time. Your mileage may vary. You may prefer to do them one word at a time. And I like to grab all the morphemes and then go on and do all the roots, and then go on and do the dictionary, and then go on and do the parts of speech. We're going to talk about each of these as we get to it. All right, so co. And how do we do this? Just the way I wanted to. There is a makef here. I am taking the makef out of the morpheme. That means that eventually I will have a version of this word that the only difference is it doesn't have a makef. I'm okay with that. Your mileage may vary. You may decide in the lookup text to take all the makafim out. I would support you in such a decision. I have decided not to do that. The reason I have decided not to do that is because I don't want to. And that's all there is to it. Amar. I'm going to go through these kind of quickly until I get to one that's interesting. Adonai. Okay, this one is vaguely interesting. No, it's not interesting at this level. It's not interesting at this level. Never mind. You know what? I've been doing this wrong. I'm going to pull this information here. That's not different, and that's not different. And that one's not different, but did I do it? I didn't. Okay. The divine name. I've already done this because on this book I already did the corrected or the open source translation, but I am putting the divine name in a special word style so that once the file is produced, you'll be able to see it stand out a little bit better. This one has no difference that way. Oh, here we go. Let Edom. Now we have something interesting. Different people are going to have a different attitude toward this. Because I happen to know that Edom is a proper noun, and that it is appearing in a form not in the regular dictionary, I am going to put that, separate the different parts, and then, because it's easier to type Hebrew on my phone, I'm going to finish this up on my phone. And I'm going to put Lamed, because that then shows that we have two morphemes here. We have the Lamed prefix and Edom. And then it also allows me to go straight back to the dictionary version of Edom instead of the expanded version that Obadiah or a later scribe decided to use. I'm going to try and finish out the rest before we get to the end of the hour. Translation is a slow process, even when you have tools available. Okay, and then again, we'll bring this out on my phone, because this is actually men at. We have the divine name again, so we don't need to do it again. But what you can see is when I put it here, oh, they spelled it different. All right, in that case, we do need to put it different. But we want it to have the same entries going forward from here, so I'm just going to pull it from above. Vatsir. And again. We have above, telling us that it is a conjunction. But goyim, this one, if you don't know any Hebrew, is going to be kind of weird. And this is why, even if you are using tools, you need to actually know some Hebrew. We're going to grab the goyim part. The bet prefix to mean in, and then even though you can't see it, the vowel pointing makes it clear that there is a definite article. So I'm adding the definite article to the morpheme. And this is one of those things where, again, your choices are your choices. If you don't like having the definite article show up when you can't see the definite article itself, then that's entirely up to you. I do. When I know it's there, then I want... Oh, man. Must be some smoke in the air or something. But if I know the definite article is there, then I don't want to add it as a translator addition. I want to have it included. Where am I at? Shula. We are going to get all of these, and then I'm going to call it for the day, and we'll pick up next time. Kumu. But yeah, the definite article being in there, even though you can't see it. That's why you need to know a little bit of the languages. You know, nobody knows, well, nobody is a big word. Vanishingly few people know the entire dictionary of Old Testament words. There's, you know, just a few words that show up like a half dozen times, and they're not worth memorizing. And when you get to those, even if you're reading them in a regular Hebrew text, you can get it from context, or you can grab a handy-dandy dictionary and look it up. But to say, oh my gosh, alright, and I am doing my prefixes without. And when we get to the translation part, you will see why I am doing this. That'll be next time. And then I gotta decide. I am not going to separate the lamed on the infinitive form. And I literally decided that right now. And I decided that because that's what I decided. It's not a right or wrong decision. And somebody is going to argue whether there's a right or wrong decision about that. And the people that are going to argue are going to tell you that I made the right decision. But sometimes, very, very rarely, and the people that will argue will go, oh my gosh, she's making a big deal about something that almost never happens. Yeah, I am. Deal with it. But very rarely the infinitive version will have a different preposition on it. And so this is how we get started. You start out, you separate out the morphemes once you've got all your tables set up, and then you have, if we come back to here, you will already see that the morphemes for verse 1 are all filled. Oh, we need to add the punctuation. I have decided to put the punctuation on its own line. Different people will have different attitudes towards that. Again, this is not a right or wrong. This is a you do you. I decided to put the punctuations all on their own line. This is also something that I'm doing in the New Testament. So it's a lot more interesting in the New Testament, in the Greek, when we get there. But so now you can see I have all the morphemes set up. And then if you look down, you can already see begoing shows up in verse 2, and it's already separated out. We've already got our soph set up. Anywhere that the divine name shows up, it is already set up. So this is one of the reasons to do this with these tools, is once you have it, it's set, and you can figure it out. If you do it one word at a time, translating as you go, there will be times where you make different decisions when you get there. And I can actually give an example. The first time I made my translation of Matthew, it was just a spiral-bound notebook with printed pages, and there was a guy that my Kung Fu teacher knew who asked if he could borrow it, and he made the biggest stink about the fact that in one place where the King James Version had neighbor, I had translated it friend, but in other places where King James had neighbor, I had translated it as acquaintance or as neighbor. And the reason is simple. I was using a different dictionary on different days. That's all there was to it. And he made the biggest stink about it. And there's kind of something to that, in that if this wasn't just for me, if this was for general consumption, then somebody might have thought there was a different word behind it, particularly where it was, quoting from the Old Testament, sometimes quoting the same verse in different places in Matthew, and I had different words. They might think that the underlying text had different words there when it didn't. And so having something to help you stay consistent, help you stay on track, is really helpful, because there's literally thousands of words and thousands of verses in the Bible. You're going to forget how you did it. And you even see this in the King James Version. Sometimes Jeremiah is translated Jeremy, and sometimes it's translated Jeremiah. And the difference is how the translator was translating it that day, nothing else. When you get to the underlying text, it is exactly the same thing in the underlying text. And it's fine, I understand, been there, done that. But anyway, this is where I'm going to close down today's lesson. Lesson's the wrong word, today's translation. We've got a good start on verse 1. Next time we will get into actually translating the words, and you'll get to see how the information pulls through. And then probably, if we get lucky, we will get all the way to the point where we've got the first verse translated, depending on how many stories I have to tell. Have a good day, and God bless you.